Today we've got a great malicious compliance story against a boss that talks down to their employees and says that nobody can do their job. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, HOA receives a check for all fines. Short history, fall 2005, significant other and I buy our first house together. We're happy, baby's on the way, house is cute, and in a new subdivision, HOA just formed. We're at the end of a blunt cul-de-sac, quiet, no traffic, neighbors nice. 3-ish years later, the US economy crapped the bed and wiped with the drapes. Over half of the homes in our subdivision have been foreclosed on or are in the process. Me and mine aren't paying on our mortgage. We've moved out and a family friend and his family have moved in. They lost their house. He pays me a discounted rent. I'm not paying the mortgage, but maintaining the house with his rent. The HOA is having troubles maintaining the common areas and keeping things clean because of lack of funds. Junky cars and dead or dying landscaping are everywhere. One home burned to its foundation. A few months after my friend moves in, red fire lane paint is applied to the curbs of all the cul-de-sacs in the subdivision. I'm furious because it prevents street parking in front of the house. Anytime I need to stop by to fix something or my tenant has a guest, we must park in front of a neighbor's house or in the common collector streets and walk in. I call the local fire department to ask why they need so many fire lanes, seeing as how there were no hydrants nearby. They told me they hadn't requested additional fire lanes, nor had they asked for curbs to be painted. They said anyone can just paint a curb red. It's the signage or a hydrant's presence that makes it a legal fire lane. The paint's just there to help you interpret the signage. I check and sure enough, no signs. Come to find out it's a ploy by the HOA to drum up more funds. If they paint curbs red and call it a safety zone, their bylaws allow them to fine a homeowner for violating the safety zone. Funny also that the HOA president lives at the end of one of the cul-de-sacs, and now the neighbors can no longer park in front of her house without getting safety zone fines. One evening, just past twilight, wearing a high-vis vest, safety glasses, and work boots, I paint over the red curb with boring gray paint, specifically designed for concrete with great coverage. I do the entire cul-de-sac. 3 weeks later, it's red again. 2 days later, gray. 5 weeks, red. Then gray with silicone top sealer. Then red that flakes off almost immediately. Then red again, flakes, and then a sign that reads, "Safety zone, no parking." For lack of payment, the home is now under notification of foreclosure, and I'm working with an agency to help navigate and file all the paperwork needed so we can short sell. Short selling in this context means that although we promised to pay the bank $350,000 plus interest for the house, they would forgive any amount we own as long as we turn the house over in good condition. I.e., not flush concrete down the toilets or poke pinholes in the water pipes, which screws us, but it's better than owing $350,000 on a house worth only $165 that will be legally taken from us in short order. Freak you, Reagan. I'm still waiting for that trickle. During a short sale, you're required to notify any potential parties that could have liens on the house. This includes the HOA. I'm up to date on my dues and have no outstanding violations, so I think I'm in the clear, but no. The HOA suddenly comes up with a whole list of violations that haven't been addressed or remedied for 5 months. Plus, additional fines for the delay. The HOA said they notified me in November but can't seem to produce copies of these multiple notices of violation. They only have the current one in March listing all the outstanding violations. Examples: black stains on the driveway, uncoiled garden hose, unapproved tree, missing bush, missing foliage, dead tree. I informed them that the stains were tire marks from driving into the garage. The unapproved tree they did in fact approve. The missing bushes they approved the removal. Here's a copy of the plan and your approvals with your name on it. It's not my fault you don't know what you approved. The dead tree. Many trees tend to lose leaves in the fall, like around November. They might look dead if you're just making up violations in February but are just dormant and waiting for spring. Even if it was dead, you can't replace a tree in November, December, January, or February. No nurseries sell saplings that late in the season. Unless you want a Yuletide tree, how can someone be reasonably expected to replace a dead tree in the off-season? The HOA delays responding, and the short sale is on a timer. If I don't have all legal items, payment for liens, and documents into the escrow officer by date, my short sale will fall through and I'll owe $350,000 plus interest on a $165,000 house that's soon to be foreclosed on. The HOA fines and fees total $1,955. $45 short of where felony fraud starts. I'm furious. This HOA is gonna freak me one last time and I'll pay for the experience. So I talk to the escrow officer and see what she needs. Only the money for the HOA lien and you'll close escrow tomorrow. She's seen reams of these come through with similar amounts of fines requested by HOAs that hold up short sales. None exceed $2,000. I ask her what form of payment will satisfy her as an escrow officer: money order, cash, or check. A check would be easiest for you, don't you think? If I write a check to HOA for $1,955 and then hand it to you, that'll satisfy escrow? They say, yep. You'll mail a check to the HOA after the documents record? They say yes. You'll have a check in 25 minutes. The next day, on the phone with the escrow officer, sitting in my car in a parking lot, 9:01 a.m. Did the documents record? Did the short sale go through? They say yes. I'll mail out finalized documents and any other items before close of business today. Thank you. Hang up. I walk into the local branch of my bank and inform the teller, I need to place a stop payment on a check. Edit, my bad, I didn't include the fallout, Rule 7, here goes. And HOA never tried to collect or contact us again. Now, on principle, I hate the idea of HOAs telling you what you can and can't do with your property. Something like, you removed a bush from your yard? Yeah, that's a fine. Like, I get it, it comes with the perks oftentimes of having maybe lawn service provided, a community pool, or a house nice enough that just has its own pool, or even the nicer ones that have facilities like tennis courts and stuff. Or maybe pickleball nowadays, it seems like everybody's moving to that one. But this is definitely up there as far as scummy HOA stories I've heard. I think they just knew that you were in a position that it would hurt you very badly to try to get any kind of legal counsel, and while you were at your lowest, they were hoping they could just tack on another almost $2,000 bill on your way out. I mean, they didn't even have the records to try to enforce that. Of course, after OP managed to get out of there, they never reached out about it again. They knew they didn't have a case. Classic Sherbert399 commented, "Dang, this is such an American post. I can't believe you can just stop paying a mortgage because your property value went down." Doll Geek commented, "That's not why they stopped paying the mortgage. The economy crashed and a lot of people lost their jobs, so they had no way to pay the mortgage. There were also a lot of people who got suckered into adjustable rate mortgages that kept getting more and more expensive to pay. It's normally not an issue because houses generally appreciate in value. So if you can't pay your mortgage, then you just sell your house and move somewhere cheaper. However, this particular crash was a result of a bubble in the housing market, so now houses were worth less than what people owed on the mortgages." Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy awesome stories of malicious compliance, it would be amazing if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is, Boss told me how to organize my tools. I've been a mechanic for nearly 15 years. I'm the lead tech in my shop, and my company just sold recently to a different corporation, and with that came a new boss. A little bit of history about new boss. He is 22 and the son of one of my older bosses. So everybody suspects a bit of nepotism at play. The older boss was ruthless and a jerk, and really put a dent in my confidence about being a mechanic, so I may hold somewhat of a grudge against the family, but I try to do my best to move on and just do my job. The new boss and I have had some minor issues already in the 3 months he's been here, but I'm the type of person who can generally put my feelings to the side if the money keeps ending up on my paycheck. Today, however, that changed. I will admit, I am not the most organized person. I have ADHD, and at 33 years old, am still learning to function without the medicine that I weaned off of at 26. My toolbox is normally cluttered, but I keep all my tools in my area or on top of my box. It's the system that works for me. This morning, I clocked in and was about to unlock my box when the new boss came up to me and said, "You will not be working on cars today until your box is organized." I said, "My box is organized in the way that it works for me." He shot back with, "Not good enough for me or the company. I need to be able to find tools when I need them, and it needs to look neat and orderly for when corporate comes through." I paused for a second and said, "So you are telling me that you need to be able to find my tools that I purchased when you need to use them? I don't remember signing that agreement." He nodded and muttered something about insubordination and that he would be passing off all the work to the other technician until it was completed to his satisfaction. I had assumed he was bluffing until 3 cars came in, and all 3 tickets were handed to the other tech. I don't have any problem being told to clean up, and I would have even done it his way, but I had a problem with his tone, and this was messing with my paycheck. So while he was in the back doing tire inventory, I opened the top drawer of my toolbox, spread my arms, and swept every single thing into the drawer that I could. I repeated for the second and third drawer until the top was clean. I used the same process for both of my smaller carts until each one could be closed and locked. Then I clocked out for lunch. I'm currently sitting in my car in the parking lot eating lunch and browsing job listings while watching him try to open all of my drawers to use my tools, because 3 more cars came in and the other tech can't handle 6 at a time. Update: I did not expect this to blow up like this. I clocked back in from lunch and boss asked to speak with me. Apparently he called the district manager and also his dad, who was a district manager of another district, for advice, and it sounds like they both told him to make it right, and that he couldn't afford to lose me. I know how it sounds, but it's true. He told me that he just wanted to make a good impression on corporate who would be coming through in a few weeks, and that he shouldn't have targeted me personally. He paid me for the 3 vehicles he worked on, and I let him know that I was willing to work with him, but if he ever spoke down to me again, there would not be a do-over. I would leave. He also inquired about buying his own tools. He's not a bad dude, just a little anxious, I guess. I suppose I will stick around for a little, as the paychecks are worth it, and the drive is convenient, and I have a wife and house to pay for. As for some of the responses, yes, I am somewhat of a slob with my toolbox, but I also average 10 to 15 cars a day, so I don't always have time or the drive to neatly organize my tools daily. He said he'll be bringing his toolbox from home and calling or texting to ask to borrow before borrowing. I guess I'm somewhat of a rare mechanic, as I don't mind people borrowing my tools as long as they're put back. Also, the empty toolbox comments. I own all 4 of my toolboxes, so they would be coming with me if I left. Thanks for the support, guys. Seems like maliciously complying paid off for once. It's kind of unrelated, but it just takes me back to my time in 4th grade. For anybody that had it similar to me, you pretty much were in the same desk almost the whole year, and each desk had a cubby so you could store whatever you needed, extra paper, some bookmarks, whatever math tools if you need like a ruler or whatnot. And my 4th grade teacher would always do end of year awards for all the kids in her class. She floated that I would be a good candidate for messiest desk, a prestigious title to earn, surely. Crumbled Newman commented, "I'm not a mechanic, but have a really good friend who is. We used to play around in the garage on cars he was working on for friends, so I get to hear about mechanic life. One of the lessons he taught me was to never, ever touch another man's toolbox. You bought those tools. What gives him the right to even look at them sideways?" I'm eager to read the fallout of this. Arizona Geek commented, "My dad was a mechanic for most of my childhood. He had tens of thousands of dollars worth of tools. All Snap-on tools. I only got in trouble one time for using his tools and not putting them back cleaned and in the correct spot. One time was all the trouble I needed to get into to understand. You don't mess with someone's tools." Our next story is include questions from students. About 20 years ago, I studied to become a physics teacher. As a part of our curriculum, we had a thing called Didactics Lab. It was a lab where they had some basic devices such as electrostatic machines, pneumatic bench, simple toys and tools. The drill was that one week we were preparing some experiments and planning a lesson, and the next week actual school children would come and we would present our experiments to them and teach them physics. The lab was run by an older professor who was pretty laid back and a young PhD candidate who was doing everything to show us how important she is. As part of our preparation week, we had to prepare lesson plans in which we would indicate our aims, our methods, and predicted outcome. This is what teachers do in regular work, and as my mom was a teacher, I was familiar with the format. So I was simply writing everything as required, including a brief description of the lesson like, teacher presents the experiment and explains the science behind, then answers questions from the students, etc. The PhD candidate thought this was not enough and demanded that I write much more detailed plans, including the exact questions the students will ask. I told her it's impossible because I can't predict what questions will be asked. She told me to extrapolate on the basis of the questions asked by students during previous classes. So I did. My next lesson plan looked as follows. Teacher switches the electrostatic machine on. Girls are screaming, boys are laughing at them. One of the boys throws a paper ball at the girls, his pals laugh. The girls are outraged and demand for a teacher to do something. One of the girls asks, "Do you really want to be a teacher?" My mom says their pay is crap. Another boy examines the equipment sitting on the shelf and says, "My neighbor has a basement full of such electric crap. What do you think he might need it all for?" The teacher tries to conduct the experiment. he is interrupted by a girl announcing, "My auntie is a physics teacher as well, but she lives in another town." One of the boys asks if he can go to the toilet, and so on and so forth. It was like 10 pages long instead of the usual page or two. The PhD candidate was outraged and told me those are stupid questions that no student would ever ask, and I should write only the smart questions. I told her she told me to extrapolate on the basis of previous interactions with the students, and the questions and students' behavior already happened to me at least once. She sent me to the laid-back professor, who read my whole plan chuckling all the way, and told her that I obviously understand kids already, so I don't have to write my lessons plans anymore, apart from one page of brief description of the experiment I planned. The PhD candidate was avoiding me for the rest of the class, but I got a good note in the end. Obviously, you can't really tell without witnessing firsthand, but I got a feeling OP actually is a fun teacher. I mean, especially in a situation where you get to go see some electrostatic machine. I never did anything like that back in my school days. I feel like I missed out now. The Real Shack Attack commented, "That's probably a teacher's assistant on a power trip. When making a regular lesson plan, you already have a good grasp of your students and their abilities. I bet the PhD didn't tell anyone the age or grade of the students either. I'm supposed to make up smart questions? For who? Third graders who haven't heard of momentum or inertia? For some middle schoolers who are still learning about thermodynamics? Different grades and schools have different knowledge, abilities, and, obviously, questions. From a child asking, 'Who is this Newton guy?' to a high schooler trying to figure out what chemical reaction you just demonstrated." Our next story is, do you have any Grey Poupon? Not my story, but my best friend who got malicious compliance by a chef. Bet you heard the story about a million times, Reddit. Back in 2005, my best friend and I worked for this kids camp. It was a week-long stay kids camp. We would get campers on Mondays and have fun till Sunday. I, at the time, was a counselor, and so was my best friend. Had a few funny stories from working these summers, and of course, the darndest things kids will say when parents aren't around. I could fill a book with the stories, pranks, and fun days we had. Me and my buddy had become fanatic experts in ultimate frisbee by our 5th year. Anyways, so every other lunch would be an outdoor sack lunch. The lunches were made by a pretty cool guy, a chef who volunteered his hours. He would stand proudly by his food when it gets served. He had his wife as a Sue, a guy we'll call Barry, so my best friend is a wise bud and a class clown type, and if he can get a jab in, he will. During our first sack lunch day of the summer, he'd grab his lunch and then walk over to the chef to thank him. But right before thanking the guy for making his lunch, he would walk up to the guy, then proceed to mime roll down a window, and then in a fake English accent, he would ask, "Do you have any Grey Poupon?" with his hand extended like the commercial. 5 sack lunches of this same act later, the chef becomes gradually ticked. It was fine the first time, but now you're just a horse's bleep. Cue the malicious compliance. The chef prepared a special bag to which he wrote Mr. Grey Poupon on the label. My best friend is in line with his kids grabbing lunch bags and sees the special labeled bag. He grabs it with surprise. Inside was the normal sandwich, chips, cookie, milk, snack crackers, and 30 packets of Grey Poupon. For the full summer, my friend got a similar bagged lunch with just as many Grey Poupon packets. My friend started asking the chef to hold back as he didn't need that many each time, but the chef kept putting 24 or more inside his bag. Now, cue some more malicious compliance. On the last week of kids, my friend goes to get his lunch bag. The Mr. Grey Poupon labeled bag was filled to the brim in mainly Grey Poupon mustard packets. The bag must have weighed a pound, maybe 2, like someone had dumped a case in the bag. As my best friend grabbed his bag, the chef said, "Support it from the bottom." Days later, with a chuckle, I asked the chef, "What gives with a giant bag of mustard packets?" The chef replies, "Had to finish the crate somehow." On my buddy's last day, he went to his mailbox cubby. Lo and behold, in his mailbox cubby was one last surprise, a full gallon of Grey Poupon mustard as a gift. When I asked the chef secretly some days later, he admitted, "I had to blow the surplus budget on something, right?" I think we all know or have met that one person at some point or another who's just either way too permanently sarcastic or way too overly jokey, and they just don't read the room. Honestly, what he did here with the rolled down window, that's kind of funny. I mean, sure, even maybe like by the 3rd time, but ain't nobody gonna want to put up with that for an entire week. You just look stupid, Mr. Grey Poupon. Appropriate Rip 9996 commented, "Barry had to show hospitality somehow." And besides, the guy showed up with an imaginary Rolls-Royce motor car and rolled down the window. You can't just give regular yellow hot dog mustard after that. And just like the commercials, they all ended with an excess of mustard available to the masses. Our next story is, dirty uniforms are fine, then we are wearing them. For context, I am working in a IC engine components manufacturing MNC Tier 1 company as a shift in charge for machine shop, and our uniform is white shirt and dark blue pants. In a machine shop environment, shirt will get dirty easily and company will provide only 2 shirts per year. We have raised concerns many times, and as a corporate culture, nothing has changed. One day, I'm troubleshooting on machine, one of the hydraulic lines got a leakage and oil squirted all over. My shirt became soaked in oil. I have only 2 shirts, and next day I asked admin team for an extra pair. They have not seen the condition of my shirt, told me, some oil stain is not an issue, still you can wear it, blah blah, and we can't provide an additional shirt as we don't have the budget. Malicious compliance. Following week, our CEO and managers from head office coming to visit, an admin team announced everyone to be disciplined. So, me and my coworkers discussed and made a plan. On the day of CEO's visit, we came in with the dirtiest uniforms. All have heavy oil and grease stains. Some of them are not white at all due to stains. One of the admin managers saw us and asked and made a fuss. I replied with, your team only told us oil stains in the uniform is not at all a concern. He immediately called that person and we all got shirts within 5 minutes. I legitimately think if your job involves a uniform being a t-shirt, I feel like most situations would necessitate avoiding just a pure white t-shirt. Honestly, I think the only one if you're gonna do a uniform that would actually really need it is people who work outside, like construction workers or something. Like, yeah, it'll get dirty, but at least it's ethical. I remember hearing stories about people complaining because their job forces them obviously to work out in the sun, and their work uniform is black on black. I feel like just mentally that would enrage me. Like just wearing black on black out in the sun doing work? I would just convince myself that I'm warmer than I already am. Bamboozle Patoozle commented, whose bright idea was it to have white shirts as a uniform in a machine shop? Someone who's never worked in a machine shop before? OP responded saying, idea of head office team who only sit in AC cabinets. One of our customers has a white uniform, so to impress the customer, they changed uniforms. Our next story is, perverted radio station manager wants me to censor music? I worked at a prominent local radio station in the early 2000s. I had to program the broadcast and censor music. It was a chump change job and I only worked a few hours a week. I could be on call though. My manager turned out to be a sleaze. He would slap the private parts of our lady staff members. I didn't like his behavior, so I decided to give his perverted mind some joy. I was going to move to New York City after graduating college. We played a lot of songs with cussing. I was told to censor all music on my very first day. On my final day, I censored all the cussing parts, not with a beep or silence, but with moaning and other questionable noises instead. I got a few angry texts from him saying that he had to close the radio station for a day to fix things up and that it was fine to leave a job, but I don't see what compelled you to do this as your final act. I would much rather have preferred OP said that their final act was reporting this guy to the police, but that's just me. Is this guy that runs the radio station in such a position of power or financially well off that he would be untouchable? Guitars and WSC commented, what kind of radio station doesn't receive edited versions of songs from the labels? Our next story is, you can't use that coupon. Hey all, it's your friendly neighborhood teacher / cashier / produce department employee here. I have parent-teacher conferences coming up and I'm due for a haircut. I decide to going to Super Clips using one of their coupons to do so. The coupon was for a haircut for $10.99 USD that was location specific. I also had one for a free haircut through the app that I could use whenever. I decided to not show the coupon until the end. I got my haircut and was expecting some small talk or something, which I actually dread, but this guy was super focused on a conversation he was having with his neighbor. No biggie. When I presented my coupon at the end, the guy literally threw the coupon back at me saying, oh, we don't take those ones at this location. I started to argue that the location listed specifically lists the location I was at before I was saliverupted as he spit back literally, you can't use that coupon, sweetie. Not the good sweetie. Enter malicious compliance. I pulled out my phone, tapped the free coupon I had, and he rolled his eyes harder than my 8th graders as he scanned it. Funny thing was that I was paying with a 20, so I was going to tip the difference, which would have been like $7 or $8. Instead, I threw him a 5 with the same energy he threw the coupon back to me. This is definitely a situation you absolutely do not tip. Listen, I'm sorry that your barber skills only got you a job at Super Clips, but you can't take it out on the people that are going to Super Clips to save money. PN Gwyn commented, "A small note to those wondering why the difference between 20 USD and 10.99 USD is $7 or $8 and not $9.01 USD. The 10.99 USD is probably without taxes, quite common in the US, and absolutely illegal in Europe and many other places. This next story is, you are not capable of doing my job." Okay. So earlier this year, my boss took 3 months off to have some surgery and recover. I've been working for 28 years in my field and I'm pretty capable of my job. My boss is a highly strong woman who believes only she knows how to do anything. Before my boss took her extended leave, I asked about filling in her role while she was on leave and she told me, "You are not capable of doing my job. No one here is." I asked again in an email and was told the same thing. I sent the email to all my work colleagues. When they advertised to fill in my boss's role, no one applied. When management asked everyone why did no one apply, they all said they weren't capable. There are over 40 staff who did not apply. Someone from another site did apply. He had just completed his new graduate year. They appointed Bob, who was 24. Bob emailed me after a week directing me to do all his work. There were multiple links and documents, stock orders, meeting agendas, etc. I replied I was happy to do this when I get a free moment. I did nothing. It was clear within a week that Bob had no idea how to be boss and things were going wrong very quickly. I was called to an HR meeting and asked why I wasn't doing Bob's work he instructed me to do. I informed him that I already have a full-time job doing my work. How can I do Bob's as well? Secondly, I showed the email that said no one is capable of doing my boss's job. I was left alone after this. Bob basically did nothing for 3 months. My boss returned, blowing up how much work she has to do. She tried to blame the workers on the ground for not being helpful enough. I sent her back her email where she stated that I nor any staff were capable of doing her work. We didn't see her leave her office for months. I mean, when OP says, "I've been working in this field for 28 years, that's already something you hear and you're like, dang, good on you. And then you get told you're not capable of doing my job. I would imagine the person that's almost spent 3 decades doing that job could probably do that job. ESAL 2020 commented, "I've seen this story before. Not this exact one, but similar. Veronica applies for a promotion, but they give the job to a new hire. Boss tells Veronica to train the new hire. Veronica says no. If I'm not qualified to get the job, I'm not qualified to train the person who is." I love reading these kinds of stories. Our next story is, I had a racist manager. So I worked for a grocery store. I was the department head for the meat department. So racist guy is explaining why I should not order pork neck bones and certain other things. Now, he means black people. You see, some customers spend $5 and others spend $50. So one day a week later or so, an elderly black woman asks if we have any turkey necks or pork neck bones. Store boss, the racist, is maybe 10 feet away with another manager, so I loud enough for everyone to hear me said, "Well, ma'am, you see, some people," as I point to her, "spend $5 and some people spend $50. At this pointing, the poor woman is rightfully upset. Both managers easily hear me and have a "oh crap" look. As I finish that sentence, I follow with, "It's not my policy, ma'am, it's his," and point right to him. I suggest you ask him to clarify it. I then hit send on 4 cases of each smoked meat we sold, 2 more of each than normal. That jerk changed my last week's order to exclude those. Like first, my department. Second, yeah, I'm white. I'm also trans, so a minority. Third, I ain't racist, and I'm not okay with freaking up grandma's greens being made a party to that crap. So racist guy is dealing with her and she's just perfectly verbally taking him apart. The other manager comes and gets me away saying, "You're not supposed to say that." It's really disappointing that that's how they replied. You don't say the quiet part out loud, OP. You don't want to let on to somebody that you might be racist now. I love and appreciate OP's sneaky way of just completely outing this guy unabashedly. Imaginary Yak6487 commented, "I'm white, southern woman, and I love collards. I fix them the way my grandma did. My black neighbors love them and ask who taught me to cook black. My grandma and we are from here, native/local. She learned from her mom and grandma and on back. It was considered poor people food. That's what they and we were. I'll eat all the poor folks' food from the garden." But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another awesome malicious compliance story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.